You ever notice how some people come alive when the temperature drops? Like, genuinely alive. Not in that performative, I love fall kind of way where someone posts a latte and calls it a personality. I mean something deeper than that. Something almost biological. The first cold front rolls in, and while most people are mourning the sun, reaching for their SAD lamps, dreading the early dark, there's this other group of people who finally feel like themselves. Their shoulders drop, their breathing slows, their brain gets quiet in a way it hasn't been quiet in months. And if you're one of those people, you've probably spent a long time thinking something was slightly wrong with you because the world is pretty loudly built around the idea that happiness equals sunshine and warmth and long summer days. But what if that whole framework is missing something? What if the people who bloom in winter aren't broken? They're just wired differently? Let me take you somewhere for a second. There's a concept in chronobiology, the study of how biological rhythms interact with time, called seasonal personality variation. And for decades, researchers mostly looked at it from one direction. They studied what goes wrong when winter comes. Seasonal affective disorder, reduced serotonin, melatonin overproduction, the whole clinical picture of people who struggle in the cold and the dark. And that research matters. It genuinely does. But it also created a blind spot. Because while science was focused on the people who fall apart in winter, nobody was really asking the obvious follow-up question. What about the people who come together? A study out of the University of Liège in Belgium did something clever. They tracked cognitive performance and brain activity across different seasons and found that while some people showed decreased function in winter months, a notable subset actually performed better. Sharper focus, deeper sustained attention, more efficient use of working, memory. And here's what gets me about this. It wasn't just that they didn't decline, they actively improved. Their brains seem to prefer the conditions that winter creates. Now, why? Why would cold and darkness make some brains work better? Part of it comes down to something called sensory gating. Your brain is constantly filtering the world around you, deciding what gets through to your conscious awareness and what gets filed away as background noise. In summer, there's a lot of sensory input competing for your attention. Long days, bright light, social pressure to be outside, be active, be available. For certain nervous systems, especially those that run a little more sensitive or introverted, that's not energizing. It's expensive. It costs something. Winter strips a lot of that away. The world gets quieter. The light gets softer. The social expectations ease up. And for people whose brains were already working overtime to manage stimulation, that reduction doesn't feel like loss. It feels like relief. You know that feeling when everyone leaves the house and you finally exhale? That's what winter feels like for some people. Except it lasts for months. There's a personality component here too, and it's more interesting than you might expect. Research in behavioral ecology, the kind usually applied to animals but increasingly borrowed for human psychology, suggests that populations naturally distribute across a spectrum of seasonal responsiveness. Some individuals are what you might call summer dominant. They're wired for high light, high activity, high social output, and some are winter dominant. They conserve, they reflect, they do their deepest thinking when the world slows down. Neither type is better, but one type has been culturally celebrated for a very long time, and the other has mostly been pathologized or ignored. Think about how we talk about productivity, about energy, about what it means to be thriving. Almost all of it maps to summer behavior. Go, out, do more, connect, hustle, be visible. But winter people, and I think that's the part most people miss, they're not less productive. They're differently productive. They build inward, they synthesize, they sit with complexity longer instead of rushing toward resolution. If summer people are sprinters, winter people are the ones playing the long game, often without anyone noticing, because their best work doesn't always make noise. And honestly, this one surprised me too. There's a growing body of evidence linking preference for cold environments with higher trait openness, one of the big five personality dimensions. Openness to experience. It's associated with creativity, abstract thinking, comfort with ambiguity, and a tendency toward introspection. People who score high in openness are more likely to enjoy solitary activities, deep reading, complex music, philosophical conversation. And they're more likely to describe winter as their preferred season, not because they hate people or fun or sunshine, but because winter gives them the environmental conditions their brain needs to do what it does best. There's even a neurochemical layer to this. Cold exposure increases norepinephrine production, a neurotransmitter linked to attention, focus, and mood regulation. Some researchers believe that people who feel better in winter may have a neurochemistry that responds particularly well to this boost. It's not that they're immune to the challenges of winter, it's that the trade off works in their favor. The quiet, the cold, the early dark, these things come with a chemical shift that their specific brain actually benefits from. Meanwhile, summer's heat and relentless light can overstimulate the same system, creating a kind of low grade agitation that never fully resolves until the seasons change. Here's something else worth sitting with. Winter people often have a different relationship with solitude. And I don't mean loneliness, those are very different things, and conflating them has done a lot of damage. Solitude, chosen and intentional, is one of the most psychologically restorative states a person can enter. It's where self concept solidifies, where emotional processing actually completes instead of getting interrupted by the next interaction. Winter creates natural solitude, it builds it into the architecture of daily life. Shorter days mean less social obligation. Cold weather means more time in your own space. And for people who need that, who genuinely need it the way others need sunlight, winter isn't a season to survive. It's a season that finally lets them breathe. I think the reason this doesn't get talked about much is because we've built an entire wellness culture around the assumption that everyone needs the same things: more light, more movement, more connection. And for a lot of people, yes, that's exactly right. But for the winter personality, that prescription can actually feel like pressure. It can feel like being told that your natural state is a disorder, that your preference for quiet, for cold, for long evenings alone with your thoughts is something to fix rather than something to honor. And that's where the real reframe lives. Because once you understand that seasonal personality variation is real, that it has neurological and evolutionary roots, that it's not a flaw but a feature of human diversity, something shifts. You stop apologizing for not wanting to go to the beach party. You stop performing enthusiasm for endless summer. You start recognizing that your energy has a season, and that season is just as valid as anyone else's. There's actually something beautifully ancient about this. Before artificial light, before climate control, before the modern expectation of year-round consistency, humans lived seasonally. They rested in winter. They went inward. Cultures around the world had traditions built around winter stillness, contemplation, storytelling around the fire, deep sleep. The idea that we should feel and function the same way 12 months a year is incredibly new. And I think for winter people, something in them remembers the older rhythm. Something in their nervous system still answers to a pattern that most of modern life has tried to override. So if you're someone who feels a strange relief when the days get shorter, if your mind gets clearer when the air gets colder, if you've ever felt guilty for not loving summer the way everyone around you seems to, here's what I want you to take from this. You're not broken. You're not antisocial. You're not depressed just because you'd rather be under a blanket with a book than at a rooftop bar in July. You might just be a winter person, and that's not a limitation. It's a kind of intelligence the world doesn't always know how to recognize, but desperately needs. Let me know in the comments if this hit home for you. Tell me, what's the thing about winter that makes you feel most like yourself? I'm genuinely curious, because I think there are a lot more of us than anyone realizes, and we've just been too quiet about it, which honestly is kind of on brand.